You have tasted it, haven't you? That faint but undeniable sense, like something inside you already knows. You feel the echo of a life you haven't lived, yet it calls you by name, not with noise, but with silence, not with force, but with remembrance. And though your outer world may whisper otherwise, there is something within you, ancient, still, and infinitely certain, that refuses to accept the evidence of the senses as final. That certainty, it is the seed. And as that truth settles in, so too does a deeper mystery. Your longing is not reaching for the future, it is memory in disguise. What you call desire is not absence, but revelation. The end has already been written, and it is speaking now, through the medium of feeling. You are not trying to become, no, you are recalling what has always been. And this brings us to what few ever truly grasp. You do not manifest what you want, you manifest what you are. You may think you're waiting for the wish to come true, but the wish is waiting for you to arrive, not in time or effort, not through striving or seeking, but by surrendering to the inner knowing that it is done. This is the essence of dwelling in the state of the wish fulfilled. It is not a doing, it is a dwelling, a resting, a divine stillness, dressed in the costume of faith. Most look for signs, they scan the world for confirmation, but the outer is never the source. It is only the shadow of what you have already assumed within. And assumption is not merely thinking a new thought, it is embodying a new self. It is wearing the invisible garment of the answered prayer, and walking in it, silently, until the world bows and mirrors it back. So you close your eyes, not to escape, but to enter. You withdraw not from life, but into the Holy of Holies, the temple of imagination. And in that sacred chamber, there is no striving, there is only vision, vivid and alive, free from doubt. Can you feel it now, the texture of the unseen world, the inner scene where no logic rules and no past has power? That is where creation happens, that is the place of origin. And here is what most overlook, feeling is the secret. Not feeling for something, but feeling from it. You must become the one who already has. You must sit at the table, break the bread, wear the crown, not as a metaphor, but as a state of consciousness. All things follow state. Every circumstance, every person, every so-called chance event, they are messengers of the state you most consistently occupy. What then is your dwelling place? Not where you sleep, but where you abide within. Are you abiding in lack or fulfillment, in fear or in knowing, in hope or in having? For as long as you live from the state of waiting, you will wait, not because the universe is cruel, but because it is just, because it is mirror, not maker, and the mirror can only reflect the image you place before it. So if you would change your world, you must first change the image, not on the screen of life, but in the inner sanctuary. You must see and feel yourself into the new state, again and again, until it becomes familiar, until it becomes home. And when it is home, it will be here, not as fantasy, but as fact. This is not theory, this is law. You are not small, you are not bound, you are not waiting for permission. The only door that remains closed is the one you have not dared to open inwardly. The state of the wish fulfilled is not earned, it is remembered. You were born knowing this. You practiced it as a child, when you imagined your games into being. You lost it only through forgetting, and now, in this quiet return, you feel the veil begin to lift. Notice what stirs in you as you hear this, not an idea, but a vibration, not a lesson, but a recognition. The truth does not land like something new, it moves like something long buried, rising to the surface. You are not hearing these words by accident, you called them forth by readiness, for only the fulfilled version of you could summon the path to its own awakening. And yet, there remains one sacred paradox, one veil so subtle it fools even the sincere. It is the final gatekeeper between the seeker and the seen, the one belief that delays the fulfillment, not because it is untrue, but because it is almost true. And it hides in the noblest disguises, even in the words you pray, even in the way you wait. Which brings us to the deeper mystery hidden in plain sight. And so it hides, not as denial, but as delay, not as doubt, but as devotion. For the soul who believes in striving often sounds more sincere than the one who simply rests in having. Yet striving is the long shadow of unbelief. It wears the mask of virtue, but it whispers a deeper confession, I do not yet possess. And because consciousness is always honest, what you deeply feel to be true will write itself across the canvas of your world, without fail. Here is the sacred paradox. Even the most beautiful prayers can become veils when they arise from lack. To pray for what you desire is to confess its absence, but to pray from its fulfillment is to commune with God. This is the secret most overlooked. Your assumption is the prayer, your inner state is the altar, and the offering is your feeling of naturalness. Can you feel it now, that holy space where nothing needs to happen because all is already done? That is the dwelling place of the fulfilled self, not a moment of inspiration, but a home, a habitation, a continual inward stance. This is what it means to abide in Him, not a man, but a pattern, not a doctrine, but a state of being, where the Father and you are one. Before they call, I will answer, and while they are yet speaking, I will hear. Isaiah 65:24. This is not poetry, it is law. For when you assume the state of the wish fulfilled, the response is immediate, not because something outside you changes, but because you have changed. You are the sender and receiver, the call and the answer, the echo and its origin. Most wait for the world to reflect a change before they feel permission to embody it. But this is walking backwards through a mirror. You do not wait for the reflection to smile before you move your lips. The mirror is faithful, but it does not lead. It reflects what you assume as true. The moment you accept the inner image as final, the outer world begins to conform, and yet the outer is patient. It does not rush. It bends in rhythm with your conviction, not your calendar. You are not being tested, you are being mirrored. So you rest, not as withdrawal, but as creative silence. You enter the end in imagination and live there in feeling, regardless of appearances. The world calls this delusion, the mystic calls it fidelity. Fidelity to the unseen is the root of all transformation. To remain faithful in imagination is to walk with God, for God is your own wonderful human imagination, and where your imagination abides, so does your life. You may change jobs, cities, faces, seasons, but if your state remains, your world remains, because the world is never happening to you, it is happening through you. So you close the senses, not to deny the world, but to return to first cause. You let go of the external picture, not because it is evil, but because it is echo, and you sink into the deeper ground, the sacred soil of your inner speech, your imaginal acts, your emotional allegiance. These are the seeds from which all life flows. And what if you fail? What if the old state pulls you back like gravity? Then you do not curse yourself. You remember, you forgive, you revise, you return. Like a child practicing a role, you try on the costume again, until it fits not as pretense, but as nature. You fall asleep in the feeling, and let the night rehearse your resurrection, for sleep is not escape, it is sacred rehearsal. Feel the end now, not as a destination, but as a presence. The scene may be simple, a touch, a word, a glance, but let it be saturated with the knowing that it is finished. Feel the joy of having, the ease of being, the quiet confidence of fulfillment. Dwell there, not for effect, but for union, and know that this state, if persisted in, must externalize. There is no might, no maybe. The law is immutable. The only question is your inner fidelity. Will you dwell in the assumption long enough for the harvest to appear? Will you dare to feel it real, when all the senses say no? Will you trust the invisible over the visible, the eternal over the temporal? Because hidden beneath even this knowing is a subtler truth, one that few are ready to see. It is not only your desire that must be fulfilled, it is your identity that must be remembered. And that remembrance changes everything, not only what you manifest, but who you are becoming in the process. And that leads us to a deeper unveiling, a truth so close it often goes unseen, though it shapes every experience you call life. It isn't just what you want that forms your life, it is who you believe yourself to be. The state of the wish fulfilled is not a technique to get more, but a return to the truth of your nature. Desire is not an invitation to chase, it is an echo of who you already are, remembered through the language of feeling. And when you realize this, you no longer strive for outcomes, you embody origins. Most assume they are separate from their desires, that what they long for lies outside, somewhere down the path of effort or time. But here lies the deeper unveiling. The state of the wish fulfilled is not a bridge to the desire, it is the desire in its first form, invisible but complete. To dwell there is not to attract, but to remember, not to manifest, but to awaken, and this awakening is gentle, it does not demand, it whispers, you feel it as a warmth before the image, as a quiet certainty before the form, and the more you abide there, not occasionally, but consistently, the more the world begins to conform, without resistance, without strain. The doors open not because you knocked, but because you became the one for whom they were always open. This is the difference between wishing and dwelling. Wishing is of the surface, it observes, it waits, it reacts. Dwelling is of the deep, it assumes, it knows, it rests, and in that rest, the promise is fulfilled, not by effort, but by alignment. For every creation is simply the outer crystallization of an inner state, faithfully held. Think now of the person you would be, if the desire were already complete, not just what you would have, but how you would feel, how you would walk, breathe, think, speak. Let that version of you rush, not as fiction, but as fact. Feel them clothed around you like a garment. Let that identity become familiar, and as it does, the former self begins to fade, not by force, but by neglect. For whatever you stop feeding within the garden of imagination must wither. You do not kill the old man, you forget him, you no longer visit his house, you stop rehearsing the wounds, the limitations, the doubts, and in their place, you give your attention to the fulfilled self, again and again, until you no longer remember the feeling of lack. That is the true rebirth. Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. Romans 12:2. Not by changing the world, but by changing your dwelling. The mind, when renewed through assumption, reshapes the very fabric of the scene, and when you know this, nothing is withheld. The world becomes fluid, not fixed, reflective, not commanding, for you are not the servant of life, you are its source. You live in a mirror, and the mirror cannot lie. It reflects with precision what you are within, and yet you are free to shift at any moment, to revise the inner image, to choose again, not by force, but by feeling. Every assumption held in conviction becomes fact, and every fact is just a shadow, a footnote to the state that gave it birth. So if something in your world seems unkind, unloving, untrue, do not fight it, do not fear it, return instead to the center. Ask not what must be fixed, but what must be assumed, for no one to change but self, and when the self is realigned, all things follow, effortlessly, naturally, as though they had all. Notice what softens in you as you hear. There is no race, no battle, only remembrance, and in that sacred return, you reclaim your power, not as will, but as stillness, not as effort, but as embodiment. You are not here to seek, you are here to be, and to be is the holiest act. When you abide in the fulfilled state, you are not pretending, you are creating, you are planting the invisible seed of the word, and it shall not return void. Even now, unseen forces are moving to make way, not because you pleaded, but because you assumed, and assumption, when persistent, is the womb of all that appears. But to remain there, to live not in fleeting glimpses, but in unwavering identity, this requires a deeper surrender, a willingness to let the old world dissolve, a daring to no longer need proof before peace. And in that quiet courage, something far greater than a single manifestation begins to unfold, something eternal, something holy. There is a level of dwelling that goes beyond even desire, beyond outcomes, beyond change, a dwelling so deep it dissolves separation itself, and reveals a truth most only brush against in dreams. It feels like silence now, deeper than rest, wider than thought, not the silence of absence, but of union. The silence that comes when the search dissolves, not because you found something, but because you remembered you were never separate, and in that stillness, something ancient rises, like a whisper echoing through eternity. I and my Father are one. You are not trying to become fulfilled, you are fulfillment expressing itself. You are not chasing wholeness, you are the dreamer dreaming the perfect end. The line between you and the wish disappears when you stop identifying as the seeker, when you no longer bow to time, but dwell in the eternal. Now, then the desire is not something to be reached, it is something to be released. You release it not by letting go of the want, but by letting go of the waiting. You stop standing outside the door, you walk in, and you live there, in imagination, in assumption, in felt certainty, until your being and the desire are one and the same. This is not imitation, this is incarnation. Many want to visit the state of the wish fulfilled, like tourists in a holy land, but it cannot be touched lightly. It must be taken as yours. You must own it as your dwelling place, not as a performance for the world, but as an inner oath. And when you claim it inwardly, with full conviction, the world yields without resistance. All that you see around you, every condition, every delay, every unfolding, is nothing more than the perfect mirror of your inner stance. It may appear slow, but time does not measure manifestation. Time only reveals where you are dwelling, for when you dwell in the end, time bows, circumstance bends, the outer rearranges itself around the flame of your inner knowing, and if the senses try to contradict you, you do not argue, you do not explain, you turn inward, you remember, you feel again, you assume again, not with strain, but with trust, not with will, but with quiet intimacy, for the fulfilled self is not loud, it does not need to prove, it simply is. You begin to realize that you are not dwelling for the sake of results, you are dwelling because it is true, and truth has a fragrance. Truth needs no defense, it radiates, and what it radiates, it draws. Your world will change, yes, but the deeper gift is the self that emerges in the dwelling, the self that no longer questions its worth, no longer negotiates with doubt, no longer asks how or when, only rests in I am. This rest is not passive, it is the highest form of power. It is not doing nothing, it is doing only what aligns. It is pruning every thought, every feeling, every inner conversation that belongs to the former self, not in fear, but in devotion to who you now claim to be. And each time you return to the fulfilled state, each time you sit there in stillness, you fortify that identity. This is what it means to be born again, not to take on a new belief, but to shed the costume of limitation and be clothed in your true form. You do not wait for the world to call you by your new name. You answer to it now, in silence, in faith, in your inner temple, and the world must follow. Let your inner speech speak from the end. Let your imagination no longer reflect your fears, but create your joy. Let your emotions rehearse the satisfaction, the gratitude, the ease of already having. For what you feel consistently, you become, and what you become, the world must honor. This is the holy choreography of assumption. You are not forcing reality into place, you are allowing it to echo the song you've chosen to sing within. And that song is already playing. The question is, are you listening from the fulfilled ear, or from the empty one? You know the difference. One feels light, expansive, certain. The other feels hungry, grasping, unsure. One lives in the now, the other forever waits for permission. You must choose, moment by moment, where you abide. And the more you choose from the end, the more that end becomes inevitable. But even here, in this unfolding truth, a deeper layer stirs beneath the surface. For if all you desire is truly already yours, then what remains is not to get, but to die, to let the former self fall away completely. And what arises in its place is more than a new identity, it is the remembrance of the eternal self beyond all desires. So the old self begins to dissolve, not in violence, not in grief, but in a kind of holy fading. As a dream slips away upon waking, so too does the identity built upon effort, fear, and longing, and in its place, something timeless begins to rise. Not something you create, but something you unveil. You are not becoming the fulfilled self, you are remembering that you have never been anything else. This is the sacred death, not of the body, but of the illusion that you were ever separate from your desire, that you needed to earn, or reach, or strive to possess what was always within you. And this death is gentle if you do not resist it. It is mercy disguised as loss. It is grace disguised as surrender. The world may still reflect the old story for a time, like a bell ringing long after it's been struck, but within, the sound is gone. You no longer vibrate to the frequency of lack, and the echo can no longer bind you. You do not wait for the mirror to change. You turn your face toward the unseen, and rest in the vision that has already been fulfilled in the deep. Herein lies the quiet mastery, no longer reacting to what is but assuming what must be, not out of fantasy, but out of fidelity. You are loyal now to the fulfilled version of yourself. You answer only to that name, listen only to that inner voice, walk only from that place of completion. The world cannot help but reorganize itself in response, for the world is clay, and assumption is the hand. The world is shadow, and consciousness is the light. You do not chase form, you embody truth, and the form appears, perfectly timed, precisely shaped, without strain or striving. You do not need to push the river, you become the river. You do not need to fight the tide, you become the moon. To live in this state is to walk softly, inwardly crowned, not arrogant, but certain, not loud, but luminous. You do not need to explain your faith to anyone. You carry the signature of it in your tone, your stillness, your smile. You are no longer governed by appearances. You are guided by inner knowing. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Hebrews 11:1. Substance, not wish. Evidence, not fantasy. This is the texture of the fulfilled state. It is not vague, it is not distant, it is real, in the only realm that matters, the realm within. And what you accept there, without contradiction, becomes law in the world without. So the old self, with its questions and doubts and delays, is gently laid to rest, and the new self, quietly radiant, deeply convinced, rises like dawn from the horizon of your being. It needs no introduction, it needs no validation, it simply is. And from this state, life flows differently. You no longer think in terms of it, you feel only in terms of already. You no longer wait for confirmation, you walk as confirmation. Every step becomes an act of remembrance, every breath, a silent agreement with the divine. You are not commanding the world, you are listening to the echo of what you have already accepted as true. And this acceptance, this deep quiet yes, it creates without effort. It calls forth the scene, the voice, the encounter, the shift, each one wrapped in the fragrance of inevitability, not because you forced it, but because you became it. You live from the end, not as a visitor, but as a native. You do not leave it when the day grows heavy. You do not question it when the facts seem slow. You remain, faithful in feeling, anchored in the unseen. Feel that not as a hope, but as a home. The state is alive. It breathes through you. It walks with you. It speaks in your silence. You have clothed yourself in the invisible, and the world responds as if it had no choice, because it doesn't. Consciousness is the only cause, and you are the operant power. But even this realization, as complete as it feels, leads to a more profound unveiling, a truth so intimate, it slips beneath words, a recognition that your desires were never about things at all. It was never the thing you wanted, not truly, not the house, or the partner, or the title, or the healing. Beneath every longing, something deeper pulsed, something sacred, hidden in the folds of form. It was not about possession, it was about expression, not the getting, but the being. You were not chasing outcomes, you were reaching for a reflection of yourself, of who you are. When all masks fall away, and only essence remains, every desire is a veil, and behind it waits identity. You thought you were reaching for love, but what you sought was to remember yourself as love. You thought you were longing for abundance, but what stirred within you was the call to awaken as the one who has never lacked. This is the hidden thread that runs through all yearning, not to acquire, but to return. And this is why the Lord does not respond to words, or effort, or even the heat of desperate wanting. It responds to assumption, to felt identity, to the unshaken knowing, I am that. The wish fulfilled is not a prize granted, it is a self uncovered. And the moment you feel it as natural, as familiar, the world takes its cue, and reshapes itself around your inner revelation. So you dwell not for the sake of manifestation, but for the joy of alignment. You feel the end, not as strategy but as surrender. You become the one who no longer waits, because in the inner realm, nothing is missing. The desire dissolves, not in disappointment, but in realization. You have always been the thing you sought. Look now with new eyes upon the desires you once chased. Strip them of image, and feel the quality they carried. Was it peace? Was it connection? Was it freedom, confidence, recognition, intimacy? Let that essence rise. Let it swell in your inner body. That is your true desire, not the form, but the state it points to. And that state is available now, without condition. You need not earn it. You need only dwell in it. When you feel the state as real, the details follow, not because you summon them, but because you aligned with the nature that gives them birth. The outer becomes inevitable, once the inner is established. This is the precision of the law. It does not guess, it does not delay, it reflects perfectly, faithfully, consistently, the state you refuse to leave. And if the echoes of the old world try to reassert themselves, you smile softly. You do not fight them, you do not plead, you simply return.
You close your eyes and feel the wish already fulfilled. You rest in it, not as escape, but as cause, for the unseen is more solid than the seen. What you feel inwardly, you will walk through outwardly. There is no need to hurry. The seed already contains the tree, and the seed of every reality is feeling, not surface emotion, but deep embodied truth. You do not need to feel excitement or passion. You need only feel it real, real enough that doubt becomes irrelevant, real enough that time no longer concerns you, real enough that nothing in the outer world can shake your peace. This is what it means to dwell, to live, to breathe, to be the fulfilled self, without ceasing, not for 5 minutes, not in brief rituals of imagination, but as your natural place. The same way you do not rehearse being your current identity, you simply are. So too with the new, it must become your unseen homeland. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee. Isaiah 26:3. And the thee is your own inner knowing, your own fulfilled assumption. When your mind no longer drifts to the how, when your attention no longer chases the outer picture, but stays fixed in the felt end, then peace reigns, and from that peace, manifestation flows like breath. Let it be simple now, let it be soft, no more struggle, no more trying to make it happen. Feel the self that already has. Let them sit in your skin, walk with your rhythm, speak through your silence. Let them pray without words, and dream without effort. You do not need to chase the reflection, you need only stand in the light, and let it appear. But as you settle into the stillness, there is yet another unveiling, a truth, deeper than manifestation, deeper even than identity, a mystery that dissolves the line between self and God, and invites you to remember the one source behind it all.
The moment you touch the essence of the fulfilled state, something quieter than thought begins to stir. Beneath all the images, beyond all the assumed roles, deeper than any version of success, there is only one presence moving through it all. You feel it, not as a voice, but as a knowing. You are not just imagining, you are not just creating, you are remembering that the one who imagines and the one who fulfills are the same. You have never been separate, not from your desire, not from your source, not from God. The line you believed in was illusion, drawn by thought, erased by silence. And here, in this inner temple of assumption, you meet what has always been with you. I am. Before any name, before any form, before any wish, I am. This is not abstraction, it is embodiment. The same power that formed the world lives in your imagination, not beside you, not above you, but as you. And when you dwell in the state of the wish fulfilled, you are not petitioning some distant power, you are awakening as that power. The assumption is not just the method, it is the mirror, showing you who you truly are. All things are birthed from this sacred center. Every scene, every person, every so-called coincidence is drawn into your world through the womb of awareness. What you hold within yourself with conviction will shape itself around you in perfect fidelity. The law is never late, it is never unjust. It can only reflect what you have assumed to be true of yourself. So when you assume a new state, you are not adding something to yourself, you are removing what was never real. You are peeling back the mask of lack and revealing the face of fullness. You are not calling things into existence from outside yourself. You are letting what already exists within you come forth, like light rising behind closed eyes. This is why you need not force, and must not beg. To beg is to forget your nature. To plead is to assume distance, but to assume is to claim. To feel it real is to say with quiet boldness, it is done. You do not need proof, for the assumption itself is the proof. You do not need signs, for the state you dwell in is the sign. All else follows. When you say, I am, you are planting the seed of creation. Whatever follows is shaped in the image of that inner declaration. Say it with reverence. Say it with rest, not as a future hope, but as a present truth. I am healed. I am chosen. I am loved. I am fulfilled. Not in word alone, but in vibration, in feeling, in identity. Let your inner speech now reflect your end. Let your nightly reveries become altars. Let your silence be filled with sacred assumption, not fantasy, but fact in its earliest form. And watch how your world, like clay on the wheel, molds itself around the shape of your unseen dwelling. You do not need to understand how. The how belongs to the bridge, and the bridge is always built from the end. You rest in the destination, and the steps appear, not because you chase them, but because you are aligned with the one who walks them. And in that rest, something else opens, a deeper gentleness, a holy intimacy. You begin to recognize that the fulfillment is not the reward, it is the expression of union, union with the truth of your being, union with God. The law is not cold mechanics, it is divine romance. It reflects your self-embrace, your self-remembrance. This is why the law works best in stillness. In the quiet your assumptions rise like incense. In the night hours, your inner world is most fertile. You plant the scene gently, feel it as natural, and drift into sleep. And what you sleep in, you awaken into, first within, then without. This is the rhythm of creation, seed, rest, unfold. But even as you learn to dwell in the end, to live from the finished state, there is yet a deeper unveiling still. A mystery that makes all striving vanish, and reveals the greatest secret of all, that even the desire itself was never yours to begin with. And if the desire was never yours, if it did not originate in the surface self you've known, then what was it? Where did it come from? What force placed it gently within your heart, so quietly, that it often felt like longing, or ache, or holy hunger? You begin to sense, with a hush that moves deeper than words, that the desire was not born of ego, but given by the divine. It was not to tease you, it was to guide you home. For every true desire is the voice of God calling you back to yourself. Not the small self, the self of names and stories, but the eternal self that knows no lack, no absence, no fear. The desire is not a test, it is a map. It shows you who you already are, beneath the veils of doubt and delay. It is not pointing to something you must get, but to something you must remember. You feel it now, don't you? That shift in the heart, the quiet dawning, that your deepest longing was never separate from its fulfillment. That the state of the wish fulfilled is not something to enter, but something to awaken to. It was written upon you before you spoke your first word. You are not walking toward it. You are opening your eyes within it. And when you dwell in this knowing, not just conceptually, but experientially, you feel a reverence begin to rise. The assumptions you hold are not mere techniques, they are sacred agreements. Every time you feel from the end, you are saying yes to the divine will within you. Every time you assume the desire fulfilled, you are joining hands with the one who gave it. Delight thyself also in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of thine heart. Psalm 37:4. Not as reward, but as revelation. Not because he changes his mind, but because you align your mind with what he already sees in you. And what is that vision? That you are already whole, that you are already one with all you've ever longed to be. So you drop the chase. You let go of effort. You cease bargaining with the future. Instead you become still. You listen, you feel. And as you sit in the silence of the wish fulfilled, you begin to feel not only the joy of having, but the holiness of receiving. Not from the world, but from within. You realize the desire was the gift, and the fulfillment, the confirmation. This is why assumption must be sacred. It is not play acting, it is communion. You are aligning with a higher intelligence, choosing to see yourself through the lens of already. You do not dwell in the end to get something from God. You dwell in the end because you are of God. And to imagine from the end is to say, I believe you, even when my senses do not yet agree. This inner agreement becomes your resting place. You no longer plead with life to shift. You no longer plead with life to shift. You no longer scan the world for evidence. You know that all things must bow to the state you persist in. And so you persist, not through strain, but through peace, through quiet repetition, through feeling the scene, until it breathes on its own. Let the scene be simple, let it be vivid, let it carry the tone of finality. You are not rehearsing, you are residing, you are no longer knocking, you have entered, you are seated at the table, you are living from the answer, not toward it, and the world begins to shape itself to match your new residence. Even now, the bridge of incidents is weaving together in the unseen, not random, not delayed, perfect, precise. It cannot miss, because the law cannot fail, because God cannot contradict himself. And if the desire was planted by him, then the fulfillment must also be his work through you. But this leads to yet another sacred mystery, one the rational mind cannot grasp. Yet the spirit already knows that even fulfillment is not the end, for the one who dwells in the wish fulfilled discovers a still deeper longing, not for manifestation, but for union beyond all desire. There comes a moment when even the joy of fulfillment begins to dissolve, not into lack, but into light. The form no longer matters, not because it is unwanted, but because the heart has found something richer. You feel it as a deep stillness behind the desire, a presence that asks for nothing, yet gives everything. And in that stillness, the line between you and the wish fades, until only being remains. It was never about what you could manifest. It was always about who you are in the silence, when nothing is missing, and nothing is needed. The true fulfillment is not the thing itself, but the union it reveals. The return to oneness, the complete collapse of effort. And when you rest in that, even the desire becomes holy smoke, sweet, but not grasped. You begin to see the wish as a door. You pass through it, not to possess the object, but to discover the self who has no beginning, no end, no limit. This self does not dwell in outcomes, but in presence. It does not seek proof, it is the proof. And when you touch this presence, everything else becomes an extension of it, grace flowing outward, effortless, precise. You may still imagine, you may still assume, but the tone has shifted. No longer trying to become, you are now simply revealing what always was. Your assumptions are no longer tools of attainment, they are expressions of remembrance. You assume not to get, but because it is natural. You feel the end, not to chase the result, but because the end is who you are. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, says the Lord. Revelation 22:13. And what is the beginning, if not desire? And what is the end, if not identity? And who are you but the bridge, the beholder, the one who holds both in the temple of awareness? There is no gap, there is no other. All is within you, moving as you, waiting to be accepted as already fulfilled. So now, you no longer ask, will it come? You ask instead, who must I be to know it is already here? And then you become that, quietly, inwardly, instantly. You no longer argue with reality. You assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and wear it like breath. You let it soften your voice, open your chest, color your inner speech. It becomes your posture, your peace, your path. And what of the outer world? It follows. It cannot do otherwise. The outer has no power of its own. It is a servant to your inner knowing. It bends to match the frequency you have chosen to live in. But even this bending feels less dramatic now, less necessary. For the true miracle is not what changes around you, it is what has awakened within. The dwelling place becomes your resting place, not as effort, but as essence. You live from the end as though nothing could shake it, because nothing truly can. And in this stillness, you discover that the greatest power is not in manifesting what you want, but in no longer needing to. Not because you are empty, but because you are full. This fullness is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand recognition. It simply is. You begin to walk lighter, speak less, smile more. You no longer seek signs, because you are the sign. You no longer try to convince anyone. Your being speaks loud enough. Your assumption becomes your atmosphere. And here, in this sacred calm, something even more profound begins to stir. Not as desire, not as longing, but as love. A love that asks for nothing. A love that sees through all appearances. A love that recognizes everyone and everything as extensions of the one consciousness dwelling in you. And this love has no opposite, no condition, no fear. It is the very substance of God. To dwell in the state of the wish fulfilled is to dwell in love, not as emotion, but as awareness, not as sentiment, but as certainty. And when you live from this state, all things are added, not because you needed them, but because you no longer resist them. You no longer doubt your worth, so the world returns to you what you have already given yourself in spirit. But even here, as love begins to swallow every trace of separation, there remains a final unveiling, one so complete, so silent, that it cannot be taught, only entered, only felt, only known in the deep. This knowing arrives without sound, without ceremony, like light spilling slowly through a closed eyelid. You cannot grasp it, you cannot hold it in thought, but you are it. It waits for nothing, seeks no proof, wears no title. It is not an experience, but the ground of all experience. It is the one behind every image you have ever imagined, the source of every desire, the silence behind every fulfilled state. And when you meet it, not as a concept, but as your own being, there is nothing left to become. You thought you were entering the wish fulfilled to manifest, but the wish fulfilled has always been a corridor, gently guiding you inward. And here, at the center, you find not things, but presence, not outcome, but origin. You find that everything you've ever sought is already here, not in form,
but in fullness. And this fullness, it does not need your effort. It asks for your attention, your willingness to rest inside it, without question. It reveals that the highest dwelling is not a scene or a feeling. It is surrender, not to fate, but to truth. The truth that you are already complete, already held, already won. And from this place, assumption is no longer a tool. It becomes a song, not something you do, but something that moves through you. You walk in the rhythm of your end, not as a technique, but as a natural unfolding. You are no longer trying to feel it real. You are the feeling. You no longer look for signs. You have become the sign. The identity you once wore, the one that waited, wanted, wondered, has faded like mist. In its place is stillness, a stillness that does not need to convince, a stillness that carries creation within it, complete and whole. You understand now that manifestation is not a reward, it is reflection, it is your own face, seen clearly, for the first time. And what of the world, what of time, and conditions, and appearances? They still move, but they no longer lead. They no longer command your attention. You are rooted now, not in the seen, but in the unseen. You live from the inside out, and the outside, gently and without resistance, conforms. Be still, and know that I am God. Psalm 46:10. This stillness is not absence, it is awareness. It is the cessation of effort, the end of becoming. Not because you've given up, but because you've arrived. You no longer project your desire into a distant tomorrow. You gather it back into the now, where it has always lived, waiting to be recognized. And in that recognition, you find freedom, not from the world, but from the illusion that you ever needed to wrestle with it. You move through life like one who has already arrived. Your actions become expressions of your state, not efforts to attain a result. You assume, you imagine, you walk, not to make something happen, but because something already is. This is true dominion. Quiet, gentle, unshakable. You do not shout, you do not strive, you know, and in that knowing, the law bends, the door opens, the way clears, not because you forced it, but because you became it. You remembered, and what you remember in imagination, you meet in form. Even your prayers change, no longer pleas from lack, they become thanksgivings from fulfillment. Every word you speak carries the weight of already. Every thought you think is clothed in completion. Every breath affirms, I am. And in this breath, the mystery completes itself, not as an end, but as an infinite return. You have not found something new. You have returned to what was always yours. The state of the wish fulfilled is not a moment. It is your eternal nature, gently unveiled, quietly claimed. Feel it now, not as something to do, but as something to rest into. Let the awareness of completion hold you. Let the silence beneath thought cradle you. Let the God within speak through your feeling. You are not separate. You are not waiting. You are the fulfilled wish, unfolding itself moment by moment, into form. But even as you rest here, the mystery deepens still. For what happens when even fulfillment fades into the background, and only being remains, pure, untouched, eternal? It is here, when fulfillment no longer holds your gaze, when even the image of the wish fades softly into silence, that the final veil begins to lift. What remains when there is nothing left to attain, no scene to assume, no future to feel into, no state to reach for, only being, still, full, unmoved, eternal? You begin to sense that every desire was a thread woven into the great remembering. Each one served its purpose, to call you home. But now that you have entered the innermost room of awareness, you find that nothing was ever missing. Nothing ever stood between you and peace, but the illusion of separation. You were never waiting for life. Life was waiting for you to awaken. This is not the absence of desire, but the quiet revelation that all desire has been absorbed into presence. There is no longer a self that wants and a world that responds. There is only one seamless movement of being, appearing in many forms, yet untouched by any of them. You are no longer the actor playing fulfilled roles. You are the light behind them all. And still, the world moves. Still, form dances. Still, thoughts pass like clouds across the sky of consciousness. But you are the sky now, not the cloud. The infinite, not the changing. The wish fulfilled was never a destination. It was the dissolving of distance. You have not arrived somewhere new. You have awakened to what never began, and can never end. And in this space, a new kind of vision opens. You see people not as separate beings, but as your own reflections in different shapes, different tones of the same eternal I am. Their desires are yours. their fears, your former shadows, their questions, echoes of your own sacred forgetting. You no longer judge or compare. You bless, inwardly, silently, knowing they too are on their way back to themselves. To dwell now is not to imagine a scene, it is to rest in the formless, to walk through life with no need to grasp or change or measure. You act, but not from urgency. You choose, but not from lack. You speak, but your words carry the still fragrance of eternity. This is the deep rest promised from the foundation of the world. This is the peace that passes understanding, and still the law remains, perfect and exact. Your assumptions continue to create, but now they arise spontaneously, without effort. They flow from being, not from wanting. They unfold as gentle extensions of a heart already whole. You need not manage them. You need not track their fulfillment. They are born fulfilled. I have said, ye are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High. Psalm 82:6. And when you dwell in the being beyond fulfillment, you know this not as poetry, but as self-recognition. You are not borrowing the name of God. You are awakening as the one who wears it. You no longer petition the divine. You express it. This is not arrogance. This is the quiet humility of light. It does not announce itself, but by its presence all things are seen. When you know yourself as the light, you no longer fear the shadows. You no longer run from delay or cling to outcome. You live in the gentle rhythm of what already is, and the world becomes softer, kinder, truer. Let yourself settle there now. No reaching, no assuming, just being. Feel the space between thoughts, the stillness behind breath, the awareness that watches all things yet remains untouched. This is where the state of the wish fulfilled has always been pointing, not to a new condition, but to your eternal condition, veiled by memory, now revealed by grace. And yet even here, in this sacred neutrality, a new curiosity arises, not as longing, but as wonder. What is creation when it flows from fullness? What does life become when there is no more resistance, no more forgetting, no more delay? This is where the real adventure begins, not of becoming, but of revealing the infinite forms of the one you now know yourself to be. And so the adventure changes form, no longer a reaching upward, it becomes a flowing outward. You are not climbing now, you are radiating, not asking the world to deliver, but watching the world respond to what quietly overflows from within. You have ceased to seek from a place of lack, you have begun to give from a place of knowing, and everything begins to bloom around you, with a kind of effortless precision, because you no longer stand apart from the garden. You move through life not as a servant to condition, but as the author of atmosphere. Even the simplest actions carry new weight. A glance, a word, a choice, each one becomes a declaration of the state you dwell in. You are not affirming with words alone, you are affirming with being. The assumption is no longer something you remember to do, it is who you are, even in stillness. And when others ask, how did it come? What did you do? You smile, because there was no doing in the way they mean. There was only the quiet decision to be, to remain, to dwell. You stepped beyond the mechanics of trying. You gave up the search for technique, and in the space that remained, truth entered, not as noise, but as clarity. You no longer need to rehearse the scene. You carry its fragrance everywhere. You no longer need to revisit the feeling of the wish fulfilled. The feeling has become your resting breath. You live as the answer, and everything you once desired now comes not to complete you, but to mirror you. This is the fulfillment that feels like peace, not elation, not spectacle, just quiet rightness, the perfectness of the moment, a sense of inevitability that makes waiting irrelevant, a calm joy that does not rise and fall, but abides like a steady flame. You do not need to see the result to feel it. You feel it, and the result becomes almost secondary. And yet this does not make life dull. Quite the opposite. The world becomes more vivid, more playful, more kind. You are not weighed down by need. You are lifted by presence. You find beauty where you once found burden. You laugh more easily. You move more freely, because the future is no longer your source of joy. Your state is, and from this state, all things emerge with grace. Even the challenges you once feared become teachers, mirrors showing you where you have not yet fully accepted your divine inheritance. You do not resist them. You welcome them with soft eyes and steady breath, because you know everything is responding to the vibration you hold, and you are free to shift that vibration in any moment, not by effort, but by remembrance. You remember your nature as the one who chooses, not with force, but with faith. You no longer repeat old stories of being stuck or small or forgotten. Those voices belong to a state you no longer occupy, and as you stop feeding them with belief, they vanish like mist touched by morning light. You may still revise, you may still imagine, but now it comes not from urgency, but from art, from love. You revise with tenderness, you imagine with delight, you assume not to get, but to play, to express, to unfold the divine through form. You begin to see your whole life as a canvas of consciousness, nothing wasted, nothing random, all of it shaped from within. Let yourself feel that now, the sovereignty of your inner world, the softness of knowing you are never at the mercy of the outer, the sweet power of living from the end, not for results, but for union. You are not practicing presence, you are presence. You are not applying the law, you are the law in motion. And yet just when you believe the journey is complete, when there is no more grasping, no more proving, no more lack, a final truth begins to shimmer at the edges of awareness, one that does not deepen your power, but dissolves the need for it, a truth not about what you can manifest, but about what has always remained untouched beneath every dream.
There is a stillness so complete, it doesn't even whisper, it simply is. And when you become quiet enough, empty enough, still enough, you can feel it, a presence beneath every identity you've ever worn, a being untouched by desire, unshaken by manifestation, undisturbed by outcome. It does not strive, it does not assume, it simply abides. It is what was before the wish, it is what remains after the fulfillment. You are beginning to sense that this entire journey, the longing, the imagining, the assuming, the receiving, was a gentle spiral, drawing you back to this center. The state of the wish fulfilled was never just about form, it was always an invitation to return. And now, even that state begins to feel like a doorway, opening into something far more spacious than fulfillment, pure being. Here, there is nothing to add, nothing to change. You do not imagine a scene, you do not speak an affirmation, you do not reach for any state at all, because there is no separation left to bridge. You are not becoming anything, you are resting as what always was. And what is this being? It has no shape, no need, no opposite. It is the I am before it clothes itself in identity. I am that I am. Exodus 3:14. Not a title, not a command, a truth so absolute, it can never be shaken. You are that which observes all states, all movements of consciousness, yet remains unbound by any of them. You were the fulfilled state before you assumed it. You are the awareness behind all imagining. And in this realization, there is peace beyond fulfillment, beyond even the joy of creation. It does not deny the law, it does not erase the beauty of assumption, but it holds them in stillness. You no longer feel urgency, because there is nowhere to get. You no longer feel pressure to maintain a state, because the one observing all states is steady, eternal, unmoved. You are not the state, you are the one who chooses to dwell in it, or not, without ever losing yourself. And from this vantage, life softens into art. You may still choose to assume, to revise, to dwell in new ends, but now it is not because you must, it is because you may, it is because you delight in it. Like a painter, who does not need to finish the canvas to enjoy the process, you find beauty in the unfolding, not because it completes you, but because it reflects you. You begin to bless everything, not because it aligns with your preference, but because it exists within your consciousness. Even the difficult things lose their sharpness, even the waiting becomes sacred. You no longer judge by appearances, you no longer fear delay. The outer becomes a soft echo, a ripple of your inner world, but you are not the ripple, you are the still waters beneath. Feel this now, the great exhale of identity. No need to wear the robe of the fulfilled self for a moment, no need to become anything. Simply sit as the witness, the timeless, the aware. Notice how peaceful it is when you stop trying to arrive. How effortless the moment becomes when you stop searching for confirmation. You do not need to prove anything to yourself, not anymore. And yet, from this stillness, all things are possible, not because you seek them, but because nothing stands in their way. No resistance, no grasping, no contradiction within. The wish may come, and it will be beautiful, but it will not define you. It will not distract you from the deeper treasure you've found. for you have touched the changeless one, who imagines all things and needs none of them. This is what it means to dwell beyond fulfillment, to rest in the original light, to know yourself not as the one who gets what they want, but as the one from whom all wants arise and return. You are not apart from God, you are not under law, you are the expression of the law in perfect motion. And in your stillness, the truth remains, I am. And yet the mystery deepens, for if being is this complete, this whole, what is life now but the play of imagination itself? What is creation when done not from seeking, but from joy? What becomes possible when you create not from need, but from love, from silence, from delight? From love, from silence, from delight. This is the highest form of creation. It does not arise from hunger, it does not plead or reach, it plays, it expresses, it sings not to be heard, but because singing is its nature. You have entered a realm beyond fulfillment, where imagination no longer serves your needs, it reveals your joy, and from this joy, new desires may still arise, not as absence, but as music. Like a melody that wants to be heard through form, you feel creation moving through you again, not as compulsion, but as invitation. You may imagine a new scene, you may assume a fresh end, but you do so as a sculptor, who already knows the stone is alive with form, the pressure is gone, the striving, dissolved, only beauty remains. In this state, you do not fear delay, you do not measure progress, you walk through the world as though the wish were already given, not because you are convincing yourself, but because you have seen that the gift and the giver are the same. The feeling is your reality. The scene is just a costume it wears for a little while. Your awareness becomes clean, uncluttered, holy. You no longer debate within yourself. You do not negotiate with circumstances. You assume, and it is done, because your assumption is no longer the reaching of the uncertain, but the expression of the eternal. It flows with ease, like breath, like sunrise. You feel it, and the world must follow. And even if the form takes time to appear, even if the bridge winds through unfamiliar terrain, you remain steady, not because you are disciplined, but because you are free. Time is no longer a test, it is a servant. Delay is not denial, it is the choreography of grace. What you assume in love will come in perfect rhythm, because it was never separate from you to begin with. Eye hath not seen, nor ear heard, neither have entered into the heart of man, the things which God hath prepared for them that love him. 1 Corinthians 2:9. But now you see them, not with the eye, but with imagination, not in the outer, but in feeling. You do not wait to see the garden bloom, you walk as one already crowned with its fragrance. And because your heart is no longer burdened by need, you become a blessing to the world around you. You assume not just for yourself, but for others. You hold the fulfilled vision of those still caught in doubt. You see them as whole, free, loved, and by the law, they begin to reflect it, not through persuasion, but through your unwavering gaze. This is what it means to pray from the end, not to request, but to recognize. You recognize the truth of being, and the lie of separation dissolves. You speak to the divine not in distance, but in identity. And what you recognize in yourself, you effortlessly call forth in others. There is no hierarchy here, no struggle, only light remembering light. And even as you move through the world, encountering its many faces, you do not flinch, you do not waver. You carry the stillness of the wish fulfilled, not as a fragile thing, but as a constant companion. Whether the moment is bright or dark, whether the scene reflects your desire or not, your state remains, and from that state, creation continues. Let yourself rest here, where imagination is not the path to freedom, but the expression of it. Where each assumption is a brushstroke, each inner scene a stanza, each feeling a verse in the great poem of your being. Let the wish fulfilled become not a moment, but a way, not a goal, but a signature of how you move through time. And as you rest, as you dream, as you dwell, something even quieter begins to rise. A question not of lack, but of overflowing. If this being is complete, if this power is real, if all things bend to the states I choose, then what else is possible? What beauty, what love, what light remains still unborn within me, waiting not to be asked for, but simply allowed to emerge? And if it only needed your permission, if the beauty waiting to emerge from within you required nothing more than your willingness to feel it real, what would you allow to bloom next? Not from striving, not from absence, but from the overfull garden of being. What if there were no limits to how softly, how generously, how radiantly this power could express through you. You begin to realize there is no end to the end, no ceiling on fulfillment, no final state to arrive at and rest. Every time you dwell fully, you make space for something greater. Every time you embody the wish fulfilled, you make room for love to widen, deepen, expand through your form, like light through clear water. The fulfilled state does not conclude the journey, it opens it. And now, because you are no longer chasing the future, the present becomes luminous. Time slows. Even ordinary moments pulse with meaning. The hand on the doorknob, the pause before sleep, the glance of a stranger, each one becomes a whisper from the unseen, echoing what you have assumed within. You don't need to interpret. You simply receive. You know it all returns to the state you carry, and so you carry it with reverence. This reverence is not solemn, it is playful, even tender. You feel how responsive the world is, how delicately it molds itself to your assumptions. You say yes inwardly, and it echoes outwardly. You embody joy inwardly, and it radiates without effort. You feel yourself no longer in the world, but through it. Like breath moving through an instrument, you become the melody you once listened for, and it is all so effortless now. The bridge forms without your hand, the people align without your prompting. You walk through days, not as the seeker, but as the one who has already arrived. The world does not need to show you signs. You are the sign. You are the sign. You are the proof that consciousness creates, because your very being reflects its truth. According to your faith, be it unto you. Matthew 9:29. And your faith is no longer in an outcome, it is in your nature. It is in the deep knowing that what you feel within, when held as natural, when sustained as true, must outpicture in form. It is law, it is love, and love is always faithful. So you imagine with a soft hand now, you feel with a quiet trust. You no longer ask if it will happen. You do not ask when. Those questions belong to a different state. You now assume as a form of devotion, not to control life, but to honor your union with it, to dance with what already is, just waiting for form. This is why the wish fulfilled is not merely a practice, it is a posture. It is not something you visit, it is something you return to again and again, until it becomes your ground. And when it becomes your ground, you do not shake. Even the winds of contradiction pass right through you. You do not abandon your state to argue with appearances. You bless the storm, knowing the sun remains within, and in that knowing, you are free. Not just to receive what you once desired, but to imagine new things altogether, greater, gentler, more whole. You feel no guilt for wanting more, because you now understand that desire is divine. It does not come from lack, it comes from the overflowing heart of being, forever expanding, forever giving of itself. You no longer ask whether it is possible, you ask whether it is permitted to live through you, and the answer is always yes. The law waits not for worthiness, but for willingness. What you dare to assume, you prepare to receive, not through strain, but through alignment, not through grasping, but through grace. Let that grace settle over you now. Let it cover every part of you that once doubted, once hesitated, once feared to claim the end. Let it remind you, softly, completely, that the door is always open, and the way is always within. But what if the very next desire you imagine is not meant only for you? What if your assumption becomes the seed of someone else's awakening? What if the wish fulfilled is not the end of the journey, but the way love teaches others to remember who they truly are? And what if the wish fulfilled is not just for you? What if the state you embody becomes a light so steady, so natural, it silently awakens others from the dream of separation? What if your assumption becomes the mirror in which another soul glimpses their forgotten wholeness, without a word, without a teaching, simply because you dared to dwell in truth? For the moment you live from the end, the world begins to shift, not only for you, but through you. Every room you enter takes on the shape of your assumption, not by force, not by persuasion, but by vibration. You do not need to explain the law to those around you. You are the law made visible, and what you are speaks louder than anything you could ever say. You become like a window, clear, unstrained, allowing light to pass without distortion. People may not know why they feel peace near you, why they feel hope again, or softness, or ease, but it is because you no longer carry the echo of effort. You have stopped insisting on lack. You have chosen to see what is already done, and in your presence, they begin to remember what is possible. You may assume now for others, not by directing them, but by dwelling in the version of them that already is. You see them healed, loved, whole, free,
and you do not ask them to believe it. You do not try to convince them. You simply remain faithful to that vision, knowing it is the seed, and what is seen in imagination, when felt as real, must externalize in time. This is the quiet power of true prayer. Not begging, not bargaining, but beholding. You hold the vision, and it becomes the invitation. You see someone as they are in God, and the world begins to rise to meet that version. You need not take credit. You need not even be seen. The state does the work. And the work is love. Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works, and glorify your Father which is in heaven. Matthew 5:16. Not a light you must ignite, a light you are, once all the layers of fear and effort are removed, and that light does not glare. It warms, it softens, it whispers of a truth long buried, but never lost. Now you see, fulfillment was never only about the form, it was about remembrance, and what you remember, you give, without trying, without preaching, without effort. Your assumption becomes atmosphere, your dwelling becomes invitation, the wish fulfilled in you becomes the permission for others to return to their own inner kingdom, and so the circle completes itself. You began with desire, you walked through imagining, you practiced assumption, you persisted in the feeling, and now you have entered rest, not as the end, but as the rhythm. You live from the end, and the end becomes beginning. Life flows not in straight lines, but in spirals, each turn drawing you deeper into yourself, and wider into the world. There is no need to hurry, there is nothing to chase. You have already become the one who has, and from this place, your giving is not depletion, it is overflow. You give without losing, you love without needing, you assume without resistance, because you have seen that all things are drawn to the one who already is. Let this realization deepen now, not as idea, but as identity. Let the state of the wish fulfilled become the rhythm of your breath, the silence between your thoughts, the stillness in your gaze. Let it remain, not because you are trying to hold it, but because it is where you truly live. And as you dwell there, as you rest in the completeness of your own being, what more might unfold, not from will, but from wonder? What dreams now begin to rise, not for your sake alone, but as a gift to the world through you? And from this wonder, the dreams return, no longer heavy with need, no longer pressed by time. They rise like mist from the deep, delicate and luminous, shaped not by desperation, but by delight. They are not cries for rescue, they are invitations to play. You feel the difference now, the sweetness of a desire born not from lack, but from abundance. It begins quietly, a thought, a picture, a sensation that lingers in the imagination. You do not chase it, you do not question it, you simply hold it in the soft light of already. You let it find form in you, not as something to get, but as something you are already becoming. There is no gap to close. You are not trying to make it happen. You are letting it unfold as it must. And still, you live from the end, not as effort, but as the most natural place to be. You no longer move to cause change. You move because you have changed. Your actions are not attempts to manipulate the outer, they are reflections of the inner. You walk as the one who has, because you know there is no truth in walking as the one who waits. Even your imagination carries a different weight now. It is not a tool, it is your language. It is how you speak with God. It is how you remember what the senses forget. You close your eyes, and feel the new scene, not to escape, but to embody. And as you feel it, the law begins to shape the world accordingly. It must, for consciousness is the only reality, and the world responds, just as faithfully as before. But now you notice it more gently, more reverently. Every shift in your world is no longer received as a prize, but as a reflection. You do not congratulate yourself, you bow inwardly, knowing that what appears without is only the echo of what you have already accepted within. Call those things which be not as though they were. Romans 4:17. Not in arrogance, but in intimacy. You are not commanding the universe, you are communing with it. You are assuming from love, from union, from quiet, and because you are no longer attached to the form finds you quickly, easily, playfully. This is where the wish fulfilled becomes more than a destination. It becomes a a posture, a vibration that colors every part of your life. You bring it into your conversations, your silence, your decisions. You let it lead you, softly but surely, into new territory, not for security, but for expression, not to fix what was broken, but to shine what has always been whole. And from this wholeness more visions rise, each one a facet of the infinite I am revealing itself in time. You may dwell now in the joy of imagining, not to solve, but to celebrate. You may call forth a new chapter, not because the last was lacking, but because life is ever expanding. You dwell in the end, and yet the end keeps blooming into more. It does not overwhelm you, it does not burden you, for you know the rhythm now. You trust the unseen, you walk with the same confidence, whether results appear or seem delayed, because your trust is not in what happens, your trust is in the law, and in the source behind it, your own wonderful human imagination, which is Christ in you. And in this realization, you are free, free to rest, free to rise, free to rise, free to shape your world, not from fear, but from fulfillment. The state of the wish fulfilled is no longer something you return to, it is the place you now call home. So listen gently now. What new scene asks to be felt into life, not because it is missing, but because it longs to be seen? What vision waits at the threshold of your awareness, already fulfilled, asking only to be remembered through you? It lingers just at the edge of awareness, like a dream you almost remember, a feeling, a scene, a gentle knowing that something is already true, not coming, not distant, already. And though it has not yet touched the senses, it begins to touch you, not in thought, but in texture, in mood, in vibration. This is how the next fulfilled state first arrives, not as information, but as invitation. You are not being asked to build it, or chase it, or wait for it. You are being asked to feel it, to become the one for whom this new scene is already fact. No questions, no effort, just quiet embodiment. The fulfilled state seeks you now, as much as you ever sought it, and all it needs is your willingness to dwell, again, differently, deeper. So you go inward, not to escape the world, but to clothe the world in new form. You move from the outer shell of what is into the inner substance of what already lives. You don't need to know the how, you don't need to explain the bridge, you simply rest in the feeling of already done, and let the unseen weave the rest. It may come as a simple scene, a glance exchanged, a door closing, a soft arrival. It does not need drama to be real, it only needs to be natural. And as you dwell in it with ease, it begins to draw the world into alignment, not because you forced it, but because you no longer deny it. Assumption is not effort, it is agreement. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Hebrews 11:1. Not wishful thinking, not blind optimism, substance, evidence. You are not imagining to pretend, you are feeling to reveal. And what you reveal in consciousness must become visible in time, because time bows to feeling, not the other way around. And now it's not even about changing your life, it's about flowing with yourself. You assume the wish fulfilled not to escape where you are, but to express who you've remembered yourself to be. You allow it to unfold, not from lack, but from rhythm. You step into the new state, not because the old was broken, but because the light in you is always expanding. You trust the unfolding now, even if nothing outside seems different, even if the echo of an old state briefly returns. You do not flinch. You know the truth lives deeper. You've assumed, and so it is done. You persist not by force, but by nature. You no longer check for evidence. You walk as evidence. You no longer revisit the state for comfort. You remain in it because you belong there. And as you remain, the world begins to move, subtly, then clearly. Not always how you expect, but always precisely. The bridge unfolds in ways so perfect, they appear accidental, until you remember there are no accidents in a world governed by assumption. What you dwell in will dwell with you. So breathe into it now. Let the feeling of the fulfilled state saturate your body. Let it soften your thoughts. Let it steady your heart. Let it write itself into your tone, your choices, your rest. Let it live through you, until you forget you ever knew another way of being. And even now, as you dwell, feel for what else stirs beneath the surface. For what deeper version of you is already waiting to be accepted. Not because you need more, but because love always reveals more of itself, when you are willing to see. What would it feel like to become the one who needs no sign, and yet carries every promise in their breath? What might your world look like, if you dared to live as though nothing was missing, ever again?
There's a stillness that only comes when you no longer look for confirmation, when the need to see is replaced by the joy of being, when you live not in anticipation, but in fulfillment. That stillness, the one that holds no question, no waiting, no edge of urgency, that is the truest sign that you have entered the state. For the one who dwells in the wish fulfilled is not watching the world for proof. They are the proof. You move gently now. Thought is less noisy. The breath is unburdened. The body relaxes into what it already knows. You are not convincing yourself. You are no longer repeating declarations to silence doubt. The doubt is simply gone, not fought, not argued with, forgotten. You've outgrown it. You've stepped into a version of yourself where it has no home. And from this place something beautiful begins to happen. The desire no longer holds tension. It holds warmth. It's not sharp or bright or reaching. It's soft, familiar. You feel it like an echo that's already returned to its source. You do not think about the wish fulfilled. You feel from it. You do not repeat the scene. You live the tone. There's nothing left to push, nothing to prove. You are not measuring time. You are not managing the bridge. You have surrendered not as a last resort, but as a first recognition that you are already the one you once hoped to become. And with that knowing, the future dissolves into the present. You walk now, not toward the dream, but within it. And the world adjusts. Not always in sudden bursts, but in quiet symmetry. People shift. Circumstances realign. The outer bends to match the inner. Not because you've commanded it, but because you've become it. The mirror does not resist you. It simply waits for you to hold the image still. He calleth those things which be not as though they were, and so must you until they are, and even then, you continue calling them, not to bring them about, but to remain at home in the state. You no longer touch and release. You dwell. You abide. And the longer you abide, the more natural it becomes. Eventually it's no longer something you return to, it's something you never leave. You understand now, consciousness does not reward effort, it reflects acceptance. You do not manifest what you insist upon. You manifest what you relax into, and you can only relax into what feels familiar. So you allow yourself to feel it often, not with strain, not with pressure, but like returning to your favorite chair, or breathing in the scent of something you love. That's how you become it. Not through force, but through frequency. Not through repetition alone, but through resonance. The state must fit. It must feel like home. And the more you visit it in feeling, the more your body learns to stay. The more your thoughts curve in its direction, the more the world responds to its rhythm. And when it does, you will not be surprised. You will not gasp. You will smile gently, because the outer is simply the echo, the thing you lived inwardly, now clothed in visibility, the promise fulfilled not by arrival, but by embodiment. So let it be easy now, let it be sweet. The heaviness is gone, the waiting has ended. You are no longer hoping for evidence. You are resting in identity, and from identity all things arise. But listen closely, in this rest, in this new softness, what other truths now become visible? What desires are no longer spoken, because they already feel lived? What would it mean to remain so deeply in the state, that even the arrival of the dream no longer excites you, because you never left its presence to begin with? And if the arrival no longer stirs you, not from indifference, but from intimacy, you will know, you have truly dwelt in the state. For the moment the outer no longer excites or surprises, it means you have fully accepted its presence within. It is no longer a hope. It is no longer a future. It is your atmosphere, your baseline, your quiet reality. This is the peace that surpasses understanding, not the kind that comes from outcomes, but the kind that holds even when the world is silent. You are no longer ruled by the movement of forms. You are led by the stillness of truth. You do not check. You do not wait. You do not watch. You simply know. And from that knowing, you walk. You prepare your table. You answer as the fulfilled version of you would. You make choices not to force the outcome, but to reflect the one who already lives in the result. And in this way, life becomes seamless. There is no longer a division between who you are and what you once wished for. You are not chasing change. You are embodying harmony. You remember now that the state is not something to visit during quiet hours and leave when the day begins. It is not a secret you hide inside and abandon at the sight of contradiction. It is a sanctuary you carry with you, into the noise, into the ordinary, into the slow unfolding of time. The state walks with you, because you are no longer trying to hold it. It is holding you, and you speak from it. You listen from it. You rest from it. When challenges arise, you no longer collapse into the former self. You remain. You breathe. You assume, not out of resistance, but out of rhythm. The rhythm of already. Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. Matthew 5:48. Not through effort, through wholeness, through the quiet, sacred alignment with the image of God within you. You are not trying to become worthy of the fulfillment. You are discovering that you already were. You are remembering that your imagination was always the voice of God, calling you back to yourself. And when you hear that call, not with your ears, but with your being, you no longer ask if it will happen. You no longer cling to the image. You let the image melt into the feeling, and the feeling melt into identity. You let go of form. You stay with essence. You are not attached to the picture. You are loyal to the presence behind it. This is how the wish fulfills itself, in stillness, in naturalness, in the absence of striving. You do not make it happen. You become the one for whom it is already true. And from there, the law does what it must, because the law is never delayed. It is only ever waiting for the state to be assumed without contradiction. And when contradiction comes, when doubt whispers, when fear echoes, when appearances scream the opposite, you do not panic. You do not resist. You remember. You go within. You return to the dwelling place, not to escape, but to create, not to hide, but to embody. You feel it real once more, and all things begin again from that silent sense. So now, you understand. Dwelling in the state of the wish fulfilled, is not a trick, not a strategy. It is not something you do once to test the law. It is the way you walk, the tone you carry, the silence you keep. It is not a place you visit. It is the ground you rise from. And as you rise, as you live, as you speak from this new height, you begin to wonder, what happens when the whole of your life, not just one wish, but every moment, becomes a reflection of this state? What kind of world appears, when your only reality is already done, when the whole of your life becomes the outpicturing of a single steady state, when every step you take, flows from the knowing, that it is already done? Then what once felt miraculous becomes ordinary. Not because it loses wonder, but because wonder has become your native air. You no longer marvel at manifestation as proof. You accept it as the most natural unfolding of being. And yet the world begins to glow in a new way, not with fanfare, but with harmony. What you once hoped for shows up with such gentleness, you barely notice its arrival. The person smiles, just as you imagined. The door opens just when you knew it would. The silence between events feels full, not empty, alive with the rhythm of unseen orchestration. You live now, not from what happens, but from who you are, and who you are no longer needs evidence to remain stable. You've crossed the threshold, where assumption has become identity. The end you once visited in imagination has become the posture you rise with, the silence you sleep in, the tone of your inner conversations. There is no fanfare when this shift completes itself, no thunderclap, no final sign, only a softness, only peace. The wish fulfilled does not shout. It settles. It surrounds you until it feels like it has always been this way. And in truth, it has. You simply stopped contradicting it. You stopped doubting your right to live inside it. Before they call, I will answer, and while they are yet speaking, I will hear. Isaiah 65:24. The answered prayer is not something you strive toward. It is something you return to. The fulfillment does not come because you earned it. It comes because you assumed it. And assumption, once truly felt, has no rival. You begin to treat your inner world with reverence, not urgency, not obsession, reverence. Every feeling is a seed, every thought a brushstroke. You no longer throw ideas against the wall, hoping one will stick. You move from within with care, with faith, with the quiet assurance of one who knows the world will always return to you what you have accepted in feeling. And when something arises that once would have triggered fear, you pause, you breathe, You stay. You do not rush to fix the outer. You shift the inner gently, deliberately, like adjusting a candle's flame. You feel for the state that already includes your answered desire. You find it. You rest there, and the world begins to bend. This is why the wish fulfilled is never a single moment. It is a continual unfolding, a spiral, a remembering. You may return to the same principle again and again, but each time with new eyes, with deeper trust, with less effort, and more love. Let it be love now. Let your dwelling in the state of the wish fulfilled become an act of love. Not to get, but to give. Not to prove, but to express. Assume because you are willing to be a vessel for divine beauty. Assume because you are no longer afraid to live as the one who has. Assume because joy has nothing to wait for. And as you do, watch what flowers, not just in form, but in feeling, in presence, in peace. The outer will catch up, because it must, but the real transformation is already complete. You have shifted who you are, and the world must echo that change. Not by force, not by chance, but by law. So let yourself wonder now, if I lived this way always, if I never again left the state of the wish fulfilled, what might awaken in me? What kind of life would appear, when all I expect is grace? If all you expected was grace, what would fall away? What fears would no longer find a home in your heart? What old patterns would dissolve, not because you forced them out, but because they no longer match the frequency you carry? When you live from the state of the wish fulfilled, not as a practice, but as presence, then grace becomes your natural outcome, not a gift delayed, a law fulfilled. You begin to notice, life flows more than it moves. There is less interruption, fewer shadows. Even the moments of contrast feel lighter, less personal, as if they're simply passing clouds that never quite touch you. And it's not because you've risen above life, it's because you've sunk so deeply into your identity as one with it. Not above, not outside, but within and of the very fabric of all that is. You are not waiting for good things to arrive. You are carrying the tone that draws them. You are not reacting to what shows up. You are selecting within, the state that casts the next scene. And this selection happens so gently now, so intuitively, that it often feels like breath, like warmth, like quiet. Your awareness no longer lives at the surface. You've gone deeper. You've stopped asking how. You've stopped watching the mirror. You've stopped holding yourself hostage to timing. You feel the thing real, and you walk in the assurance of it, not because the world told you it's done, but because you no longer need the world to confirm what consciousness already has. You are not faithless when you cannot see. You are faithful when you do not need to see. And from that faith, pure, steady, internal, the scene emerges with the elegance of inevitability. You do not rush it. You do not manipulate. You simply know this moment is enough, because it carries the seed of all I have assumed. According to your faith, be it unto you. Not according to striving, not according to the facts, according to the inner conviction, felt as being. The faith that you are already the one you once hoped to become. And what does that version of you assume without effort? What do they expect quietly, gently, without performance or force? That is the atmosphere you live in now. That is the assumption that breathes you. Let yourself live from that assumption, not just in imagination, but in action. Let your habits arise from it. Let your choices echo it. Let your tone and pace and gaze carry its signature. You are not pretending. You are no longer practicing. You are being. And in this being, even more is given. Not because you asked, but because there are no longer walls within you to block the flow. Assumption is not about getting, it is about letting. Letting the truth of who you are shine unresisted. Letting your inner world be felt so deeply, so honestly, that the outer must reflect it without delay. You're not waiting for the reflection now. You're living as the original. The world bends to match your inner stance, because there is nothing else it can do. That is not metaphor, that is law. And so the deeper question emerges: if every assumption becomes form, if every fulfilled state becomes reality, then what would you assume next? If you trusted yourself completely to live inside that truth, without fear, without pause, without limits. If you trusted yourself completely to dwell in truth, unshaken by appearances, untouched by delay, what new world would rise around you? What version of life would become your natural rhythm, your daily breath, your resting pulse? You begin to sense that the only distance between you and the next unfolding is permission, and you are the one who grants it. You do not need to feel more worthy. You do not need to clear the path. You need only to say within, it is mine because I am it. Not as wishful thinking, as law, as identity. You assume not to beg the world for change. You assume because you now understand the world as you in form,
pressed out from the state you most deeply accept as real. There's no need for striving here. The effort to believe has dissolved. What remains is quiet decision, gentle confirmation. You rise each day with the tone of someone who has already arrived, and the day conforms, not because of effort, but because of inner agreement. The outer must move. It has no life of its own, and should contradiction appear, should the facts try to tempt you back into the former state, you smile, you rest, you return. The new self does not argue with the world, it does not panic, it simply assumes again and again, until the new assumption is no longer new, until it becomes you. This is the meaning of dwelling, to abide without reaching, to remain without wavering, to let the wish fulfilled become your home and your horizon, the place you rise from and return to, moment by moment. You do not live in hope, you live in embodiment. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee. Isaiah 26:3. And what is the ye but the state of already, the image of fulfillment held as truth, even when the senses deny it, especially when they do. The mind that rests there, stayed unwavering, is the mind that calls forth peace, not as escape, but as reflection. And this peace deepens, it moves through you like a silent current, touching every area of life. You begin to notice how your assumptions shape not just results, but relationships. The way people speak to you softens, the way doors open quickens, the things you once forced now come gently, often without effort, often through routes you never imagined. This is not chance, this is law. Your world is not responding to your words, it is responding to your state. You can speak of abundance, and assume poverty. You can repeat affirmations, and still dwell in waiting. It is not the surface that creates, it is the core, the feeling, the dwelling. So you tend to the feeling now, not with strain, but with tenderness. You return inward like one returns to a garden, not to dig, but to walk among the blooms. You water your assumption with silence, you prune it with faith, and as you do it grows, it anchors, it stabilizes you, and from that stability, your actions arise, not rushed, not reactive, aligned. You move from being, not from lack. You walk as one who no longer searches, and because you no longer search you see. Life shows you what matches the tone you've chosen. People reflect the version of you you've accepted. Circumstances shift to reveal the substance of your dwelling. So you rest here, not to stop, but to stay, and you let the world catch up to the self you now carry, quietly, confidently, continuously. For the fulfilled state is not a secret you visit, it is the life you now live. And yet, even in this peace, even in this wholeness, something more subtle begins to shimmer, a question not of getting, but of giving, not from depletion, but from overflow. What becomes possible when your assumptions are no longer just for you, but for a world waiting to remember its own reflection in you, and when your assumptions are no longer confined to personal gain, when they rise beyond the individual self, and begin to shape the atmosphere around you, you realize something holy. Your state is not a private dream, it is a gift, a mirror in which others remember who they are. Your dwelling becomes a transmission, silent, unseen, but powerful beyond measure. You do not have to teach, you do not have to explain, you simply are, and by being, you extend an invitation, not through words, but through tone, through stillness, through presence. You walk as one who has received, and the world takes notice, not with fanfare, but with resonance. Some cannot name it, but they feel it. They respond to what you carry, without knowing why. And this is how the wish fulfilled becomes divine circulation, no longer trapped in the cage of mine or not yet. It flows, it blesses, it multiplies through attention, through inner gaze, through the refusal to waver. You hold the state, not just for yourself, but for every form of life that enters your field, not by effort, by being. Freely ye have received, freely give. Matthew 10:8. But you cannot give what you do not claim. You cannot radiate what you do not first rest in. And so your responsibility is not to save others, not to fix appearances, not to argue reality. It is simply to remain in the atmosphere of fulfilled love, and let your remaining become medicine for the room. This is the hidden power of assumption. Not only does it transform your life, it transforms your identity as a giver of light, not by trying to be holy, not by pretending to be perfect, perfect, but by consistently, gently, returning to the state of I am. The I am that lacks nothing. The I am that includes all. The I am that becomes the very breath of creation. You walk into situations now with a quiet authority, not dominance, not performance, authority born of alignment. You do not adjust to the tone of the room. You bring the room into your tone, not by forcing it, but by carrying it so deeply, so naturally, that everything else softens in response. Fear forgets itself in your presence. Doubt dissolves in your gaze. You have no need to speak of it. You are it. This is why the fulfilled state must be real to you, not just occasionally, not only in practice, but as a way of being, because when it is real to you, it becomes inevitable for others. The law does not pause. The law does not pause. The law does not discriminate. It reflects whatever state is most firmly and consistently held. And so now, even your assumptions expand, not because you want more, but because you see more. You become generous in your inner vision. You no longer dream small to avoid disappointment. You assume boldly, not to impress, but to express the fullness of God in you. You walk in miracles, not to gather them, but because your being has become the soil where miracles grow without effort. You rest now in deeper joy, not ecstatic, not dramatic, quiet, full, certain. The joy that comes not from a result, but from an identity no longer hidden. The joy of knowing that all is already within, and that nothing outside can add or subtract from what you carry. And yet, this kind of peace brings its own sacred question. If your fulfilled state can ripple out without words, if your dwelling can quietly awaken others, then what new world waits to rise from a single soul who chooses never to leave the state again?
What new world waits to rise, not from effort or force, but from a soul so loyal to its inner knowing that even time bows in reverence? This is not a world built by hands or governed by logic. It is born in silence, shaped by stillness, carried out through the gentle persistence of assumption. And this world is not distant. It draws near each time you refuse to leave the state, even for a moment. The state is your ark, your sanctuary, your invisible temple. When all around you rages or collapses, this inner dwelling remains untouched. You live within it like breath within lungs, natural, rhythmic, unseen, yet vital. Others may ask how you remain so steady, how peace clings to you like a fragrance. But you will know, it is not what you do, it is where you dwell. To dwell is not to wish, it is not to plead, it is not to visit for a few moments of mental escape. To dwell is to build no exit, to make the fulfilled state your only home, so that contradiction can knock but never enter. You do not entertain what does not reflect your inner truth, not because you fear it, but because you no longer resonate with its voice. You become deaf to doubt, not by denying it, but by rising above its frequency. You tune the station of your soul to the feeling of the end, and all else becomes static, background noise that cannot penetrate your knowing. And in this knowing, the days rearrange themselves. The future ceases to stretch. It folds inward. It meets you. You no longer dream of becoming. You awaken to what already is. You do not plant the seed and wonder if it will grow. You feel the blossom already full, and in time the petals unfold to match your faith. This is not fantasy. This is creation, pure and lawful. All things whatsoever ye shall ask in prayer, believing ye shall receive. Matthew 21:22. But the prayer is not with words. It is with identity, with assumption, with that sacred inner leaning into a reality no one else may yet see. But you feel it, and so it must be. Belief is not effort. It is surrender to what already lives within you. So you surrender now, not to lack, not to the old self. You surrender to the fulfillment. You let go of the gap, the waiting, the wondering. You let the wish fulfill itself by no longer calling it a wish. You wear it. You walk with it. You let it speak through your tone and breathe through your stillness. And as it speaks for more than just you. It ripples. It echoes. It draws to it the likeness of itself. You begin to notice how people change in your presence, not because you pushed, but because you held. You assume something higher of them, something whole, and they, responding not to words but to the unseen radiance, rise to meet what you never spoke aloud. This is the hidden miracle of dwelling. You become the reflection of a world made whole, and the world reshapes itself to echo your inner wholeness. It is not magic, it is law, and you are its keeper, not through effort, but through embodiment. So the question deepens, softens, opens. What becomes of your life? What becomes of this world, when you live as if nothing is missing, and truly mean it? To live as if nothing is missing is not to deny what the senses report, but to no longer worship them. It is to feel the silence beneath the noise, the wholeness beneath the craving, the perfect pattern behind the scattered pieces. It is to breathe in a room of shadows, and still know the sun is high, for you are no longer lit by appearances. You are lit from within. The wish fulfilled is not a thing to be chased. It is a place you stand, and from that holy ground, all things bend toward you, not as reward, but as reflection. You have moved from seeking to seeing, from effort to essence, and so the world, sensing no resistance in you, begins to unfold with a softness it once withheld. There is no striving in this state, no reaching, only choosing. You choose the tone you carry, you choose the image you hold, you choose to dwell again and again in what already belongs to you in consciousness, and every time you return to it, you strengthen its roots. Every time you stay, you erase another fragment of doubt. You may find now that you do not desire as you once did, not because you've settled, but because you've unified. Desire no longer burns with lack, it hums with knowing. You no longer say, I hope. You say, I remember. You do not wait for signs. You walk as the sign, the signal that the unseen is now seen through form. Even delay loses its power here. You understand now that delay is only a measure of your wavering. When the assumption is held with finality, not through will, but through surrender, delay dissolves. Manifestation is not a prize for effort. It is the shadow cast by an inner decision that never needed proof. For he that is entered into his rest, he also hath ceased from his own works. Hebrews 4:10. And what is that rest, if not the end felt now, the outcome assumed, not as concept, but as current? You enter the rest by letting go of the waiting mind. You cease from your works by trusting in the unseen law already at work within you. Now you see how sacred it is to feel something real before the world confirms it. That is the creative act. That is the divine spark. To dwell in the felt reality of the wish fulfilled is to enter the Holy of Holies, to place the seed in fertile soil, and walk away in perfect confidence, knowing the roots have already taken. You don't revisit to check. You revisit to rejoice. You don't beg the vision to stay. You live in it so fully that it would feel unnatural to leave. And this is why manifestation becomes gentle, even surprising. You forgot you planted the tree, and one day you rest in its shade. But beyond results, beyond proof or physical evidence, there comes something even quieter, identity. You no longer dwell in a state to get the thing. You dwell in it because it is who you are. The wish fulfilled becomes a mirror, and you become unrecognizable to the self who used to wait, wonder and doubt. And so the mirror expands. You begin to ask less, and imagine more. You speak less, and radiate more. You stop trying to align, and realize you are alignment. What once felt like work now feels like breath. What once required focus now flows without thought. The river no longer needs to be directed. It remembers its course. And yet, in this rest, in this radiance, a new whisper begins to rise. A question formed not from lack, but from fullness. Not what do I want, but what else can love become through me, now that I know I am already whole. And when love no longer asks, what can I receive, but instead wonders, what can I reveal, then you begin to taste the true power of dwelling, not as a method, not even as a means, but as a state of holy generosity, a quiet outpouring from a soul that has touched the infinite and come back whole. You no longer seek the wish fulfilled as possession, it becomes expression. You let it spill into your world not to prove, but to bless. You walk through your days with an inner overflowering, like a well that can no longer contain its source, and in that giving you remain rooted. You do not fall into depletion, for the one who gives from being never runs dry. This is the secret of true manifestation. It is never about getting, it is always about being. The fulfilled state is not a tool to manipulate outer things, it is the revelation of your true name. And once you wear that name, once you wear the end as a garment of inevitability, everything that belongs to it appears without strain, not because you summoned it, but because you matched it. Before they call, I will answer, and while they are yet speaking, I will hear. Isaiah 65:24. And what is this if not the echo of fulfilled identity? The end precedes the cause. The answer comes not after the request, but before. You are heard the moment you assume, for assumption is the true call. You live now as one who has already been answered, and so you stop asking with fear, and begin assuming with clarity. You become more precise, not in detail, but in essence. You no longer scatter your energy across desires. You carry the one feeling that matters, the feeling of already, the felt sense that it is so, that it cannot not be so. This is the ground of unwavering peace, not the peace that flees at the first contradiction, but the peace that stands, unbothered by winds or waves. You become like the Christ asleep in the boat. Storms rage, but you rest, for your inner world has already declared the outcome, and the outer world must yield, and yield it does, quietly, unexpectedly, not through the channels you imagined, but through the law that never fails. It comes wrapped in the ordinary, cloaked in natural movement, and yet behind it all, you sense the rhythm of something divine unfolding, the fingerprint of the unseen shaping every form. And so as you move through your life, you do not rush to change the scene. You do not force your will upon appearances. You recognize them for what they are, mirrors, nothing more, and you tend not to the mirror, but to the image you hold within. You remain faithful to the vision no one else can see, and in time the mirror must align. There may be moments where the old world knocks, familiar feelings, echoes of delay, whispers of doubt, but they no longer shake you. They pass like clouds over the mountain. You remain unmoved. You have built your house upon the rock, and it cannot fall, because the wish fulfilled is not a destination, it is the structure of your inner world, the blueprint of your state, and from that blueprint life arises, not occasionally, not rarely, but consistently, lawfully, beautifully. And now you begin to wonder, not from need, but from the deep stillness of fulfillment, what happens when the entire world begins to reflect a love that never left the state? What happens when the world begins to mirror a love so undisturbed, so inwardly anchored, that even chaos begins to bow in reverence? It does not fight, it does not resist, it remembers, just as you remembered. For every soul is seeking one thing, not answers, not outcomes, but the feeling of home within themselves. And when you dwell in the wish fulfilled, you become that home, a silent lighthouse for those lost in the fog of appearances. You do not point the way, you are the way. Not by doctrine, not by perfection, but by presence. Presence that does not flinch when reality contradicts. Presence that remains steady when others waver. Your very silence becomes instruction. Your stillness becomes instruction, not as teaching, but as transmission. You give no advice, and yet your being gives off the scent of completion. This is the secret that no technique can replace. To assume the state and remain, not as a chore, but as a love, not as duty, but as joy. You live in the end not to escape the now, but because you've discovered the now is where the end lives. It does not wait for you in some distant tomorrow. It knocks softly here, clothed in the simple, asking to be worn, and you wear it. You wrap yourself in the feeling like a sacred robe, not with force, not with trying, gently, with reverence. You let it enfold you until it becomes the air you breathe, the pause between thoughts, the rhythm beneath your heartbeat. You do not seek to make it louder, you become quieter, and in that quiet, it reveals itself. For the fulfilled state does not scream, it hums, it whispers, it invites, it never imposes, never demands. It is a soft gravity, pulling you into alignment with what has always been true. And now that you've tasted it, you know nothing outside is worth trading for the certainty within. No condition, no delay, no outcome. You realize that fulfillment was never about what arrived, but about what awakened in you. That feeling of completion, of being held by something vast and gentle. And once awakened, it cannot sleep again. Even if circumstances shake, the center remains. Even if forms dissolve, the root deepens. For the kingdom of God is within you. Luke 17:21. And within you it expands, not with effort, but with consent. You consent to feel whole. You agree to feel chosen. You surrender to the beauty of already, and the kingdom, no longer waiting for belief, blooms in secret. This is how you walk now, lightly, lovingly. You no longer chase, you attract by essence. You no longer plead, you radiate, and the world adjusts, not because you fixed it, but because you refuse to leave the state that contains all things. And here in the sweet unfolding of embodiment, you notice something new. The old desires no longer burn. Some have dissolved, some have manifested, but all of them have lost their grip. And in their place, a quiet curiosity arises. Not what can I get, but what can I give from this place of knowing. Not what's next, but how deeply can I rest in this miracle of now? That question doesn't beg for answers. It opens a door, and through that door, a new kind of vision begins to form. Not of things you want, but of who you truly are beneath all wanting. Not a seeker anymore, but a revealer. Not a collector of outcomes, but a vessel through which the unseen becomes seen, effortlessly, quietly, lawfully. And so the vessel takes shape, not through striving, but through stillness. Not through accumulation, but through release. What once felt like something to become now reveals itself as something to remember. You are not adding to yourself. You are uncovering what was buried beneath the noise of seeking. You are not building identity. You are dissolving illusion. The state of the wish fulfilled is not a place you visit. It is who you are when all masks fall. When you no longer perform for outcomes. When you no longer measure your worth by time, or effort, or applause. You simply rest in your being, and from that rest, creation flows, not because it is forced, but because it is free. And here in the silence of that freedom, you begin to feel what it means to be the operant power, not the controlling hand, but the originating light, not the fixer of scenes, but the source of all scenes. For nothing can appear without your acceptance of its reality, and nothing can linger where you have withdrawn your assumption. You see now, it was never about will. Willpower exhausts the self. It clings to form and calls it truth. But assumption, true assumption, requires no strain. It is quiet. It is gentle. It simply is. You do not need to hold it tightly. You only need to return to it, again and again like breath. And each return makes it more real than the world around you. You do not convince yourself. You commune with yourself. You don't push belief into being. You dwell and let belief arise. You saturate your inner conversations with the tone of the wish fulfilled. And slowly, word by word, thought by thought, the old story dissolves into nothingness, and the new story writes itself in light. When others around you ask, how can you be so calm when things haven't changed? You will know the answer can never be spoken, because you've already seen the change, not with your eyes, but with your being. You have embodied the outcome. You've tasted the end. And no voice of doubt can remove what has already been worn within. And if you were to say anything at all, you might say this: I no longer wait for the world. I let the world wait for me. For now you understand the outer must follow the inner, and what you dwell in, consistently and joyfully, must unfold, not by favor, but by law. And so when the temptation comes to react, you pause. When the urge to question arises, you go deeper, not outward for reassurance, but inward for remembrance. You have made the inner world your sanctuary, and in this holy place, nothing is missing, nothing is delayed, nothing is wrong. You are no longer moved by appearance. You are moved only by feeling, and not just any feeling, but the sacred feeling of done, the knowing that it is so, the sensation of already, softly humming in the background of your day, like a sacred soundtrack only you can hear. And the more you abide in that sound, the more the world harmonizes. What once seemed chaotic begins to organize itself around your stillness. What once required force begins to unfold with grace. And what once felt like hope now becomes knowing. But even knowing deepens, for eventually, you stop measuring fulfillment by results at all. You stop asking, where is it? And instead ask, how fully can I dwell? And that question becomes your compass. That question opens the door to a mystery most never dare to enter. Because when you dwell long enough, fully enough, joyfully enough, you realize the wish was never the point. Something far more luminous begins to stir beneath the surface. Something the world cannot name, but your spirit remembers well. Something eternal, waiting patiently behind the veil of desire, ready now to be seen. It is ready now to be seen, not as an answer to your prayer, but as the one who prays. Not as a future event, but as the eternal presence that breathes your desire into form. You do not chase after it, because you realize, you are it. The longing was only ever a mirror, the wish only ever a whisper from the deeper self, reminding you of your inheritance. And so the journey ends where it began, in stillness, in the quiet place, where all becoming ceases and all being is known. There is nothing left to attain. You no longer try to dwell in the state. You are the state. The fulfillment is not something you carry. It is the air you move through, the tone of your gaze, the light behind your words. What once felt like effort now feels like breath.
What once required intention now flows as nature. You do not dwell to get. You dwell because you are. You do not perform inner acts to make something happen. You rest in the truth that all things are happening from you, through you, as you. This is not passivity. It is power beyond motion, not the noise of effort, but the vibration of truth. It is the deep spiritual stillness from which all manifestation rises, not by command, but by correspondence. The world reflects because the self has remembered, for in him we live, and move and have our being. Acts 17:28. And in you that being is no longer distant, no longer concept, no longer hope. It is your breath, your tone, your presence. You do not reach up to the heavens. You close your eyes, and feel the kingdom within, pulsing softly, unfolding now. You walk through your days, as one who has seen behind the veil. You eat, you speak, you sleep, but beneath it all, there is a silence that sings, a hum of certainty, a rhythm of peace. You do not wait for signs. They arise around you, like petals unfolding to the sun, drawn by your invisible warmth. And if a moment comes that appears out of step, you do not panic. You remember. You do not shift the scene. You shift the self, and the scene follows, as it must. You are no longer trapped in the loop of waiting and reacting. You have risen into the law of creation itself. You are no longer the one who wishes. You are the one who wills, and that will is not of force, but of assumption. You accept your fulfilled desire as identity, and all things flow to meet the image you hold without resistance. You wear your fulfillment as you wear your skin, naturally, quietly, continually. And what began as desire now becomes devotion, not to things, not to forms, but to this deep remembering. You become devoted to your stillness, to your knowing, to the quiet joy of dwelling in what already is. This is the great secret, hidden in simplicity, that to dwell is not to strive, but to return, not to build, but to behold, not to wait, but to awaken. The state of the wish fulfilled is not something to enter. It is something to remove every obstacle to. And when all the noise is gone, when the doubts dissolve, when the self falls gently into itself, you find that you were always there. And now as you lay your head upon the pillow, as your breath softens into sleep, you feel it, that sacred warmth, that inner certainty, that hush of already. You do not ask for it to come, you let it be, and in that letting, in that yielding, the world moves, quietly, obediently, lovingly. You have nothing more to do. You are no longer becoming, you are being, and the wish is fulfilled.